And we're off. Right. Hello again. It's still Wednesday, 14th of December, and fed up with Scotland. Let's leave Scotland behind for a bit. Had enough of Scotland, spent too long on that. So let's go to the other side of the world, because if we're going to get away from Scotland, we might as well go as far as we can. So we're going to do a couple of Australians, which are becoming increasingly highly regarded in the whisky industry. So I've got two to get through tonight, and the first one is this, which was a very kind donation by a gentleman called Nigel Crew, who I have befriended on Facebook and sent me through a sample of this, which is Starward, not Star Wars, although it's probably about as good a time to do this particular one, because Rogue One is out tonight. So when I upload this tomorrow, it's the launch day of Star Wars Rogue One, which I'm not that bothered about seeing, although I really like Star Wars. And I was there for the midnight screening of Episode 7 and had an absolute whale of a time. But for whatever reason, Rogue One just is not clicking with me. So I'll see it at some point, and I hear it's very, very good indeed. But yeah, I'm not doing the midnight screening tonight. So Starward was a distillery. It's just outside Melbourne, which is here. Now, Tasmania has got quite a few distilleries on, but there aren't that many distilleries actually on mainland Australia itself, considering it's a lot bigger, there's a lot more people there. You'd think it would be quite strange. And it was set up in 2009 by a guy called David Vitale, who looks like this. Now, he'd previously worked for a few years at the Lark Distillery, which is on Tasmania. And he's very, very keen on sort of craft beers and things like that, and set up Starward just outside Melbourne in an old, it was an old Qantas maintenance hangar where it's set up, and it's really kind of like, it's another one of these, as there's quite a few of these in America, like craft distilleries. So it's 100% Australian barley. Now, this particular one, and the bottle looks like this. It's a no-age statement because a little bit like some of these American distilleries as well, the climate, obviously it's Australia, it's quite volatile, predominantly quite hot, as you would expect, but they do have quite a bit of variance in temperatures. And it's another one of these that's kind of using the argument of, because of these various in temperatures, it actually increases the maturation. So, 2 years in cask in Melbourne is the equivalent of 4 to 5 years in Scotland, this sort of thing. So they don't need to mature it as long to get the same effect as in Scotland or somewhere else. It's take it with a pinch of salt. I do. It could be true. I don't think I think it's difficult to sort of quantify and scientifically prove, but it sounds like quite a good marketing spiel, so they are using it. So, no age statement. Now, it's matured in what are called Apera casks, A-P-E-R-A, and this is basically sherry casks. Now, apparently, relatively recently, Australian government decreed that you couldn't call Australian sherry or fortified wine sherry, because there's quite stringent rules in the terminology of sherry in Europe, and because they're wanting to kind of break into that market, and they want to be kind of, the global economy, everybody's got to be friends, it's now called Apera. Now, you will still struggle to find this kind of on wine labels and things like that, but I've got a feeling it's going to become increasingly prevalent as time goes on and these laws start to sort of really come into play. So it's Australian sherry casks rather than this mysterious Apera thing. So call it a sherry cask for want of a better word. So yeah, that's basically it. It's a relatively new distillery. It's getting some good reputations. It's winning awards. I think the label, I'm going to put the bottle back up. I think the label is absolutely beautiful. Really, really pretty bottle, which is always, is it style over content? But some of these, I would buy the bottle for that. I think it's gorgeous. Now, in terms of the name Starward, I couldn't actually find like what it was based on in terms of why he'd called it that. But I think it's a great name as well. So really deep colour. Now, I would guess that they probably haven't added colour into this, with it being craft distillery, with them doing everything supposedly properly, small scale, this sort of thing. But it's if you're saying this is sort of 4 to 5 years, then that's a pretty deep colour. Now, apparently the casks that they're using are about a minimum of about 20 years old, these sherry casks that they're using, and they're basically repurposing them. So they're recouping them, they're retoasting them, and then using them to do to mature the whiskey in. So there is a good chance it's picking up a lot of colour, but that is a really, really deep colour for what is presumably a pretty young whiskey. It's 43%, which seems to be like becoming more and more prevalent as a standard percentage rather than 40%. 43 seems to be the percentage of choice. And there really is a sort of a rich raisiny sherryness on it. It very much is a raisins and sultanas, but it's not so much fruitcake. And I've had discussions, shall we say, with a couple of people in terms of, I tend to pick up bourbon casks more as fruitcake, whereas sherry casks tend to be a little lighter. It's not a dark fruitcake that I tend to get, but that I get from bourbon casks. With sherry casks, heavily sherry casks, it's more of a lighter fruitiness. It's more of a sultana and other fruit elements in there as well. So there's a bit of banana in here as well. It's kind of like sultanas and bananas and apples and pears are more of a fruit basket, whereas I tend to pick up with bourbon casks fruit cake, really rich, dense, thick fruit cake with lots of dark fruits in, predominantly raisins and dates and plums and that sort of thing. And this is lighter. This is less of a fruit cake and more of a fruit basket in terms of, I get, yes, there's raisins in there, but it's sultanas, and it's also, there is a banana, it's like banana bread. There's a breadiness to it, kind of like brioche. It's a very sweet nose indeed. Oh God, Jesus, it's almost like a liqueur on the palate. It's really unctuous. It's really thick. The initial mouthfeel is, this is a liqueur. This isn't whiskey, this is a liqueur. It's really dense. And that fruitiness comes through. This really is, there is banana and there is raisins, but this isn't fruit cake, this is fruit bread. This is kind of like malt loaf, saurine malt loaf, which is kind of like a thick bread with raisins and sultanas inside it. And it really is that sort of thick, buttery, rich sweetness. But it's not got the density and the intensity of a Christmas cake that I get with bourbon. This is much more sherry. And this is a sweet sherry. This is kind of a, I wouldn't put this being past like Pedro Jimenez sherry, that sort of thing, that type of sweetness. But this is a really thick, unctuous kind of dessert whiskey. Very much a dessert whiskey. This would be really good with ice cream. Really good with very, very good sort of vanilla ice cream. There's so much sherry influence on that. There really is. It is almost like drinking a sherry. And for 43%, there's very little kick because of the richness, because of the thickness of this, the spirit of the liquid that's in there. It is dangerously close to the liqueur. It's so rich. It's so sweet. It really is. It's borderline liqueur. It's almost a little bit too overpowering. I like it. I mean, I love heavily sherried whiskies anyway. But this is just pushing the limit of how far and rich and thick you can take a sherried whiskey. And it's becoming less whiskey and more sherry. If you like your sherried whiskies, you're going to love this. Absolutely, no questions asked. It is a really, really good whiskey. For like a no-age statement, you could easily have that on a blind tasting and go, right, how old's that? And people are going, 18-year-old, minimum 15. There's very little heat to it. It's because of the overpowering nature of the sherry influences in there. It's very difficult to pick out that it's quite a young whiskey. But I think it's probably going to be too sweet for some. I think it will be too rich, too full, too sweet for whiskey drinkers. If you're wanting a light, delicate whiskey, not for you. This ain't for you at all. But if you want a rich, thick, after dinner whiskey with dessert, you know, not even after dinner, with dessert, with that final course, probably go down really well with cheeses as well. If you've got a cheese board on, that would go really well. That would be fantastic with, maybe not brie, but with blue cheese, that would work really well. Or a really sort of pungent, mature cheddar, that sort of strong cheese, that would go really well, really, really well, because it's up there with kind of Pedro Jimenez sherry and port and that sort of rich decadence, but in the form of a whiskey. It's something else, it really is. I really, really like that. Like I say, it's borderline to be too full on, but it's just about the right side for me. And that's unlike any other whiskey I've had so far. But just because of the sheer richness of it. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. But if you don't like sherried whiskies, or if you prefer your whiskies peaty, yeah, all right. But if you prefer your whiskies lighter, softer, more subtle, it's probably going to be just too over the top for you. I can still, it's still kind of like coating the inside of my mouth. It really does feel like I've been drinking a whiskey liqueur, which is no bad thing because I love whiskey liqueurs. Very, very interesting indeed. Right, I'm going to really need to drink some water to get this. I'm not putting it down by saying I've got to get this, you know, out of my mouth, but I've got another one to try. So I really need to wash my mouth out. But yes, and for 46 quid that Master & Malt are selling it at, that's actually a really good price. I think that's a very, very good price indeed. Considering it's made the other side of the world, I think that's a fantastic price. I think that's very, very good indeed and well worth checking out. So get your paws on that if you like the sweet stuff. Right, quick rinse out, see you in the next one. Cheers.